Apologies if this seems like a whisper cast. Unfortunately, not even unfortunately, my wife is sleeping in the other room. And I just wanted to record this early on a Thursday morning to leave some ideas out there in the ether. I've been watching the current circumstances with a certain degree of quizzical interest, which perhaps comes in part from being on lockdown. Perhaps it's the shut-in mentality already taking over. But the notion that the population has to change based on this event. And my thought about it changing in isolation was the notion of the Arab Spring, which in sum total probably didn't achieve very much, but as a collective human response was absolutely fascinating at the time, and at least pushed out old oligarchs in some cases, replaced them with new oligarchs in other cases, created a wide variety of very horrible and destabilizing circumstances. But the notion that this potentially could also occur in Western democracies following just amazing institutional corruption, which seems to be very heavily and well represented by the laws that these people have created. I think these things could be very interesting. The nature of literally the tens of millions of dollars that a few supposed representatives, be they Congress people, senators, what have you, and, potentially even billions of dollars in terms of shorting and various other financial instruments that could have been used through this process. The notion that people have made vast quantities of money with the knowledge that a virus was going to be far worse than it was, and then, in contrast, publicly sold this knowledge as, or downplayed, let's say, what the circumstances were, and even, I think, representatively failed to protect the public through this, i.e. personal profits over failing to protect the public. That this will change the mentality of people when it's realized en masse. That the situation has to have a resolution that will require people to think more critically and, in some cases, more hostilely associated with the system that they find themselves in. And I've been seeing various small outcroppings of this through social media, although it's very difficult, if not impossible, to use the existing tools to have these kind of discussions. The evolution and resolution of This Comes Next, a podcast where I thought I would be able to have these discussions in any case. So I've been having this mentality as a shut-in. Then yesterday our dishwasher started leaking or whatever happened. It filled up with water. And because I was working at the time, I've been working at the time for a lot of stuff recently. In fact, the whole nature of this time period just seems to be more focused kind of corporate work on one regard as I kind of deal with other things in another regard. In any case, because I was working at the time, my wife did searches online and assembled a crew of folk that were going to come out. In fact, I'm partially responsible because I called the plumber in this circumstance. In any case, so the first fellow turned up who nominally was supposed to be a technician, some kind of person that was going to do something with the dishwasher, and proceeded in a very surly fashion to instruct my wife to only speak at him at one time and me to only speak at him at one time, and all these other very surly instructions which basically perturbed any meaningful information to be provided to him. What he provided to us was it was going to be either $280 or $400. And then he, demanded I get a shop vac for him and clean out the shop vac and do all these other things where I was working for this fellow. And then he sat around for about an hour and drained the water with our shop vac from the dishwasher. And then he left, saying that we needed to get in a plumber. So we then, $280 odd later, we then got in the plumber. And plumbers in this part of the world are very curious. In fact, the whole thing here is predatory. Every aspect of working with these people. In fact, the first guy that turned up was clearly predatory. He did nothing. He didn't take the dishwasher out. He didn't look at the dishwasher in any fashion. He just took our shop vac, used it to vacuum up the water, and then said we needed to get a plumber. So anyway, the plumber came out. He wasn't even a plumber. This was what they call, I guess, an assessor. Kid, probably 20 at most, maybe 23 if I was lucky, with an afro and a rat tail and his kind of baby Huey-like friend who kind of lumbered in, never talking to me directly, always kind of being muttered to by the other fellow. Anyway, so they arrived and he went down into the basement. Having looked at the dishwasher, none of these people actually touched things. And then he went down into the basement and he came back upstairs and he said, well, you have galvanized pipes, so there's nothing we could do. It's, how many bathrooms do you have? And I said, well, I've got 2 bathrooms. He said, well, that's going to be $10,000. And I said, well, last time you guys were out, it was $4,900. What's changed in the past 3 years? And I realized that this whole thing was just a scam. The people that call themselves plumbers that you find online aren't actually plumbers at all. They're just people that come out. They have no connection with anything. And, they try to charge you exorbitant sums before they'll even start working on the house. So anyway, what was fascinating through this is we were at this car. And of course, the first surly fellow at least maintained some degree of 6 feet, what have you. The second guy in his flunky, no 6 feet. So anyway, we were at the guy's car and I said, well, look, what I pay for, because he was charging, I think, $165 for the assessment that we needed to pay them $10,000. Anyway, I said, look, can you at least tell me if water is coming to the dishwasher? And he kind of looked at his flunky and he said, okay. And I said, do I need to pay more for that? And he said, no, that'll be part of the $165. And he came in and he actually removed the dishwasher from the housing. And I said to him, if you think you're going to break anything, just stop. Don't do this. Because we've had circumstances previously where both appliance repair people and plumbers have done damage and then run. Like literally, they just drop everything and run. So I said, look, if you're going to do any damage, just don't. But if you are going to assess it, if you could, please. So they pulled the dishwasher out, which the dishwasher technician, the supposed repair person, hadn't even done. And then acknowledged that, yes, there was water coming to the dishwasher, then pushed it back in and left. So we still don't have a dishwasher that works. In fact, we think, oh, did I mention that? Somewhere between the first guy vacuuming the dishwasher, the water stopped coming to the dishwasher. So there's this curious thing where, and we then read, of course, as one does after all this stuff. And this is the nature of panic as well. If we'd come to this with some degree of resolution, we would have gotten out the manual for the dishwasher. We would have read the manual for the dishwasher. Instead, I was upstairs working. My wife was downstairs, obviously dealing with the circumstance and just started calling numbers, which is the worst possible thing you can do in this part of the world. So we are now organizing for the specific dishwasher manufacturer's technician to come out, have a look at this thing since we've identified that the water is getting to the dishwasher. Just for some reason in the dishwasher itself, it's not bringing the water through. But having had this experience, I realized this is just business as usual. They might even be upping the prices of their scams. But this is just business as usual at this part of the world. There's no change of thinking. If anything, there's a kind of feeding frenzy of normal criminality of thought. And this whole notion of you can live remotely and think, oh, wonderful, high ideals. Humanity's going to correct all the wrongs that have happened up until now. Finally, people are going to be angry enough. And then you actually deal with the people. And realize, no, everyone's just in their own little micro scam world, working out how they can get work out how they can make money for no work, basically, or, borrowing our shop vac. And that's it. That's it. Irrespective of what the ideal should be, the underlying processing is still being done by the same processes. So anyway, that is my thought for a Thursday morning.